welcome to my review of Plastic Soldier Company Cold War Soviet Infantry. It's a box set, 141 figures, retails at £22.50, which is actually very good value for money for what you've got in. Well, what do you get? There are 9 standard sprues. These contain a mix of figures, all the standard infantry squad. You have a figure that will do nicely as a squad leader, pointing. You have a PK machine gunner, which is a slightly odd figure to have included because they were only issued at company level, but it does give a support element that you will end up with a few extra. You also have a grenadier with an RPG 7, nice figure, particularly like the fact it's carrying the ammunition backpack with it, something you don't see on a lot of figures. One of those was issued to every squad. You also have an RPK, which is the heavy barreled version of the rifle. Again, 1 per squad, so you have one of those. You've got an underbarrel grenade launcher, the GP25 probably for this time period. Very easy to miss. It's a slight little protrusion underneath the barrel, as you can see on this figure. You've also then got the standard rifleman. Most of them are unique poses, although you do have 2 identical kneeling figures. Not a bit of an annoyance, but not a deal breaker. There's also 2 that look similar, but when we look at the back, as you can see here, that you'll notice one is actually carrying the reloads for the RPG. So even though they look the same from the front, from the rear they look quite different. Looking at the weapons sprue, the first thing that we've picked up is the fact there's an SVD sniper rifle. This was usually issued at platoon level, so one of the stands could easily include that. You have an SA-7 or an SA-14 anti-aircraft missile. This was actually a company level weapon, but it was issued down to platoon, so one of those per platoon was the usual distribution. We have a radio op, usually only going to be used at company level. It wasn't usual to have radios at platoon level, but it could also be painted up quite easily as a medic without a lot of effort. You've then got a command figure, an officer figure carrying a pistol, and slung on his back is an assault rifle, so a useful command figure. You've then got the heavy weapons themselves. You've got an AGS-17 automatic grenade launcher, most complicated part of the kit, with 3 figures in it. That again was issued at company level, but you could easily add a support section of 3 of these to the platoon. Moving on to the anti-tank missiles, you have the AT-3, which is a nice simple model. I like the fact they've modelled the missile separate because it could actually be a little distance away from the firer. They could control more than 1 missile, which was fairly common in the 1973 Arab-Israeli war. However, there's only 1 missile provided. That's not exactly a deal breaker. Most people only ever model it with 1 anyway. And then you have the slightly later AT-4, which was based on the Milan missile. That was used as to supplement the AT-3 and then gradually replace it. I would have liked an AT-7, which was used a lot by the BTR infantry teams. However, it's not a deal breaker. An AT-4 will do the job quite nicely. Not all units seem to have followed the organisation anyway. And then the last part on the sprue, you've got 3 riflemen all kneeling. This is actually identical to one of the figures on the infantry sprue. Not quite sure why they decided to do 3 more like that, although kneeling figure does work nicely with weapon pairs, so you could put that on a base with the missiles. So, looking at what we have then, with 141 figures with 3 of each of the weapon teams, that's easily enough to do a full company at 1-to-1 scale. You can add in then the fire support elements of PK teams, the automatic grenade launchers and the anti-tank missiles. The only thing it really doesn't include are mortars. Now I've got around that by just picking up a couple of spare Second World War mortars. The figures will blend in quite nicely for this. It's worth noting that these figures will actually blend very well with the Battlefront figures. I don't actually have any of the Battlefront figures, but I have seen them at the shows mixed together, and you couldn't actually tell them apart. Another thing I might have liked would have been a couple of RPG 18 and 22s. You do get those in Battlefront figures. These are the one-shot throwaway anti-tank rockets. Basing up the figures, you can use obviously the rule set that you use. I know in Team Yankee they recommend an RPG and an AK on a 2-man base, and then a 4-man base with 2 AKs, an RPK and a grenade launcher. And then on the headquarters section, replace the RPK and the grenade launcher with a command figure and a radio up. I don't use that, however, because I'm basing mine for 7 Days to the River Rhine by Great Escape Games, which just has generic sections, and I've gone for 2 stands per vehicle. Slightly over on numbers, because I appreciate that if you're using a BMP platoon, you'd actually only have had generally 6 figures in a section. Actually even potentially less if it was BMP2. Mine are based around BTRs, which had an extra rifleman or 2, so end of the day it's not a big thing, and I'd rather just have the standard bases. It is worth saying, if you are basing these up for Team Yankee, that you don't get bases with these, so it is worth picking up a few Battlefront bases. I haven't, I've just used some MDF bases I had and built up the terrain to match. So let's actually have a look at some of the figures on the tabletop. My painting isn't brilliant. I have put a BTR 80 from Zvezda in with the pictures. That way you've got a scale comparison to actually see how well they relate to the vehicles. I'm quite happy with them. I hope you enjoy.